I don't think that the Gen Z are not the most spenders. It's like I feel like Gen Z, and I saw a lot of researches about that Gen Z spend a lot of money and they spend unconsciously, like they just
Oh
go
yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And Gen X, like my parents, are more aware of their money. Even if they have a lot, they like to like preserve them and they like to save them and they like to invest them in something meaningful. And Gen Z are more easygoing in terms of spending, especially online. So that's why brands are
Hmm.
targeting them, and that's why brands are targeting them online in their language
Yeah,
because they know that Gen
predatory.
X won't go for it. But
That's a good point.
when you go
It's a good point.
outside or to the store, you can see a lot of like offline advertising, and it will be
Yeah.
targeted to Gen X because they know the location of each audience.
It is December already. Can you believe it? Hip replacement episode number 37, Kyle. We've been at this for 3/4 of a year, and
Nearly the
we're
year,
reaching the end of 2025.
which is wild. Here
It's
we are. We only
Impressive.
turned 37.
I'm well, yeah, that or I'm turning Christmas. I'm surrounded here by my Christmas decorations that my wife spent
I
all
haven't
day
done mine
yesterday
yet.
putting up. Well, Kyle, we're here with Sophia Sokolinka, who is dialing in from Kyiv in Ukraine. I have to say, I am not super familiar with Sophia's work. How did we get here?
So, Sophia actually, super excited to have you here, Sophia. Welcome. Sophia,
Yeah.
actually, we were chatting on Substack because she reached out to me about something. And I was looking at her work, which is she's a creator and podcaster and does various things about life in Ukraine from a Gen Z point of view. And it's all really compelling stuff. And in our conversation, I was like, oh, wait, I know a great item that we would love to have you on as a guest. And then we started chatting, and here we are.
Here we are. Well, Sophia,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us on Hip Replacement. We haven't said it as our tagline in a while, but this is the podcast where we get into the issues and interrelations between generations X, Y, and Z. And so, very keen to hear not only your insight as a Z, of course, for my all of the old head listeners like myself, as well as the millennial, the cohort that as the largest generation in history probably makes up the bulk of our audience, but also as you know residents of the United States or expats in Kyle's case, like understanding what life in Ukraine has been like over the last few years as well, especially as it relates to the consumption of cultural material in the face of this existential threat that you have, I would imagine, daily. So anyway, very keen to hear from about all of this. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Kyle.
Of course, we're excited to have you.
So, are you collecting like all generations here? So you have Gen
I'm
Z,
the oldest. I'm the
Millennial,
oldest.
and Gen
Exactly.
X,
I'm
right?
Gen X. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a young sprightly
We have
X.
proper
I've
representation this episode. Not every episode do we, but like this is like good. Yes, this is like proper representation, which is like great. We'll share every point of view.
Amazing. Amazing. Amazing.
Well, and so I mean, I guess it's funny because the other thing that it has to be said, Sophia, is that given the conditions under which you live on a daily basis in a sort of a state of conflict, the things that we talk about in here are normally pretty frivolous. Like we're going to talk about shopping and memes and that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, but we also have it in Ukraine. Like, yeah, the life here is rough, but like we also shop, we also have Black Fridays, we also like have blackout economy, but with the actual blackout. So,
right,
yeah, it's normal stuff,
Right.
like it is what it is.
Life goes
but
on, for
yeah,
better or
True,
indeed.
worse.
true.
Well, it's interesting too because it's I think it illustrates a truism of the current moment, which is that the conditions that we all face are very individual to ourselves, but also happen simultaneously with everybody else's, right? Like on the one hand, numbers came out today. Black Friday in the States is it's been the biggest Black Friday spending ever, but fewer things are being bought and cart size is decreasing, which further suggests the sort of K-shaped economy, right? Like people on the high end are buying more expensive things. People on the low end are buying less or are buying fewer things. And so it's a kind of a remarkable illustration of that duality. I don't know. I mean, do you, sitting in Kyiv, look at all of this news from the West and does any of it land with you or make sense?
Wow, I mean, the last things land with me these days from the Western world. I
Sure.
mean, I guess the fewer things land with me with the less Western world, but we don't have Black Friday in Ukraine this year because it's like unnecessary, like just
Sure.
inappropriate in some ways. So people still shop, but they buy like batteries, they buy a power banks and stuff. So, I mean, I shop a lot, but I felt like I haven't spent anything during the Black Friday season.
Right.
And it was weird for me because like I'm a Gen Z and I spend a lot during Black Fridays. I spent last year I spent almost like monthly income during Black
Wow.
Friday. Yeah, so and I have lots of friends who do the same. Like we buy new iPhone, we buy like new, I don't know, laptops and TVs and stuff because we're adults now and we have our
Right.
income, but we spend it all during Black
Well,
Fridays.
that was going to be my question because like this came up at a little Thanksgiving I had with a bunch of people who are not American last week. And we were talking about Black Friday, and there were a good amount of people who are within your age range.
Hmm.
And all of them said sort of the same thing, is that like, oh, I bought XYZ thing for Black Friday, but it's for me. Like this is like I needed a new TV or a carpet or this or that. And so I think it's funny that like all these stories, I think that regardless of circumstance, regardless of geography, you're doing what everybody else is doing in the age range, because I feel like younger people, and maybe this is a lot of people now to the point of that stat, Ben, is like Black Friday is not a holiday to buy others things
Hmm.
because it is the time to get the things that you need on sale because everything is too expensive. Um, and that is
Yeah,
a
true.
fascinating switch. And I don't think that brands have consciously, like in their advertising and their approach, think about that. That says a lot. It really says something.
It does. There is a little bit of a contrast though in that, as Bloomberg reported, at least here in the States, the stores with the longest lines were the ones that were most Gen Z coded, and in fact were the ones that, for our Gen X listeners who don't have kids, probably would be brands that they're not even familiar with, right? Like
Right.
Addicted, for instance, is a favorite of my daughter's. Sophie, I don't know if you're an Addicted fan or if you're aware of Addicted.
Never heard of it, actually.
Yeah, there's this really, depending on how you view it, really cursed row of stores right on Broadway in Soho in New York, which is like Addicted, Brandy Melville, Garage. They're all right next to each other, and they're all the same sort of like racy clothes for teenage girls, I would say, or that sort of thing.
Okay.
But it's in any case, I think the interesting thing about the story is that those who can shop are shopping, and those who are showing up as if it's a right are youngest consumers. And I wonder if that's because they're, as you said, they are adults now, right, and have their own money to do it. B, because they feel less existential pressure from, I don't know what, the quote unquote threat of the future, or C, because we are still getting over the post-COVID hangover of not being able to go outside. And so experience is a more crucial aspect for them.
Yeah, actually, Gen Z prefer to go offline shopping. So they prefer to go to the store to shop and not online. And I can see it like in myself. I don't like online shopping. I don't like choosing stuff. I like scrolling and I like searching for something
Right.
infinitely, but I won't buy anything. I will go to the store and I will try it. And if it fits, I will buy it. So
Interesting.
I mean, lots of Gen Z are shopping during Black Fridays because we can afford during the normal times. You know, like we
Right.
are so financially stressed, and we don't have like enough income to buy new iPhone when it just gets released. You know, on September, we can buy it during Black Fridays because it's on sale, and of course, it's the affordable price for us, so we go for it. And most of my friends are shopping heavily during Black Fridays, and they buy necessities like stuff, home, like everything for
Hmm.
supplies and stuff. Because like it's really cheap, affordable, and they can buy it like during any season of the year.
Kyle, how about you? What were you and the millennial cohort doing on Black
I
Friday?
don't even know. I don't even know. That's a great question because like I don't think about anything for Black Friday. I did buy a few things, but it was like I have a big trip coming up, and I was like, I need to get like the fucking face mask that ties to the chair so I don't like break my neck while I'm sleeping on the plane. Like it's a whole thing.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, I would say
things
that's
like that. I was, to
Excuse
Sophia's
me.
point,
yeah.
doing some research and trying to find a really good way to sleep on a plane. There's like a face mask you can tie to your seat so you don't like go like that, and it just holds your head up. So I got
Okay,
that.
got it.
If it arrives, we'll see. But like, I feel like, and again, like I'm not sure generationally this year, or maybe I don't even know, but like I don't know if generationally this year if there really is a that difference of a pattern to what you said, Sophia, because I think it is sort of getting bundled up into that K economy thing. Because like I I wasn't like looking or shopping for people really, and like because like the things that I'm gonna get people, I'm gonna go to like a vintage store, or like I'm gonna go to wherever.
Mm.
Like I'm not gonna be getting this big shit. That I think is maybe also the difference with the age in a way, is that I'm like we're at a point in our lives where like we do have a lot of stuff, and like that is a truism for I think everybody. But like I have a lot of stuff. I could get the person in my life who is the richest or the not richest something, but like they both would have everything that they want. The poorest, not richest, would probably want money, and I would give them money instead of buy them something frivolous. And the richest person is like, it doesn't matter. Like, why would I get
Right.
you some like an iPhone? You can buy it yourself, and you already have three. So like, I can get you something that is more like character
See, I,
driven and vintage or whatever. It would make sense for everybody.
you're rolling around with a lot of people who have three phones, Kyle. That's like
I know enough people
that's a
have two
pretty
phones.
yeah. I was gonna say two phones is normal. Okay, so this is an interesting thing, right? Because it's the contrast in the intergenerational conversation is also to the story that the New York Times business section ran over the weekend about how Gen Xers have money to spend and retailers are ignoring them, right? And the subhead here is that
Hmm.
3 in 4 Americans ages 45 to 60 say they expect to overspend for the holidays. And they are sort of like the glue within the consumer spectrum. Um, I have to say, given historically where glue comes from, um, animals being put out to pasture, I don't know that I like being characterized as the glue in the economy, but I do,
Well,
I do think this is represents a kind of a fascinating liminal state that Gen X and myself included are in, because we are the youngest old people in history, and we expect to still be consuming the way and to be targeted for consuming the way that we were when we were in our, let's call it, prime spending years, right? When we were accumulating all of the stuff, Kyle, that you just described.
hmm.
Um, and so our I don't think our mind state has changed, but when we walk in to, these offers, things are much more millennial coded, things are much more Gen Z coded, and beyond that, things are just generally like, I don't know what it feels like very fast moving consumer goods as opposed to things that are built to last and persist. And I wonder whether that's me looking at it or whether that's just everybody looking at it.
I think it is both, because like I don't think a lot of people, well, I do think you're predisposed to notice that because you work in media. So I think you're thinking about it
That's probably true.
in a very smart way. But I don't think it's wrong, because I do think, and I'm sure you've been in those rooms too, and maybe Sophia, you have as well, where you're working with a brand or with a business or whatever, and they're looking at audiences, and I think this is starting to change, is where, like, in the late 2010s and early 2020s, like all of these businesses were like, Gen Z, Gen Z, Gen Z, we got to get them in, like they're new customers, we got to get them in, and like they just focus only on them. And like now it's sort of like even incorporating Gen Alpha too, but I do think there are inklings of like, wait, like let's like zoom out a little bit, like let's zoom out a little bit and not be so hyper, like, the brand on TikTok is a really good example where they only talked in like Gen Z speech and like very digital speak. um, but I think that there will be a sort of like that zooming out on that, because like that's exactly right, Ben. And I remember that was something I would always raise, is that like there are so many people beyond just young people using these services. A lot of tech and a lot of, say, fashion and movies and whatever are really heavily over indexed on by young people because they talk about it the most. But they're not the biggest consumers, nor are they're just the loudest. And like that is what like ends up happening. And that's not a read. I think it's just like they're online, as are millennials. And like the noise, I think, is what brands respond to, which is why I think it feels that way. But that's not the truth, I don't think.
I don't think that the Gen Z are not the most spenders. It's like I feel like Gen Z, and I saw a lot of researches about that Gen Z spend a lot of money and they spend unconsciously, like they just
Oh
go
yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And Gen X, like my parents, are more aware of their money. Even if they have a lot, they like to like preserve them and they like to save them and they like to invest them in something meaningful. And Gen Z are more easygoing in terms of spending, especially online. So that's why brands are
Hmm.
targeting them, and that's why brands are targeting them online in their language,
Yeah,
because they know that Gen
predatory.
X won't go for it. But
That's a good point.
when you go
That's a good point.
outside or to the store, you can see a lot of like offline advertising, and it will be
Yeah.
targeted to Gen X because they know the location of each audience.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too, because just purely from a marketing science standpoint, if we think about demographics and where the most attractive and most highly targeted cohorts are generally, right? It's between, there's your 18 to 34 cohort, there's your 25 to 44, there's your, broadly speaking, 25 to 54, 35 to 54. What all of these things have done is been representative for a world in which people lived less long, where people worked
Hmm.
less long, where adolescence ended sooner, all of these sorts of things. And I think what stories like this call into question, and this conversation calls into question, is just like, what are the actual
Right.
life stage changes that are representative of consumer spending, right? Like Sophia is entering the workforce, is becoming an adult, so to speak, has her own money, and spends to build that stuff. Kyle, you have been building and accumulating a life worth of things. I'm getting to the point where I'm sort of like, I have more stuff than I need. How do I get rid of some of this
Right.
stuff? You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's and then my dad, who's going to come in and who's silent generation, not even a boomer, is going to come and spend Christmas with us, and I'm sure is going to be bringing things with him that he's trying to offload. So it'll be. I wonder to what extent we get this whole thing going. Sophia, did you hear that there was a Guardian study last week that talked about how there are 5 stages of the brain that are consistent across humans. There's one big brain change at around age 9. There's one big brain change at around 32, I want to say. There's one big one around 66, and there's one big one around 83. So it's sort of interesting to think that until you get into your early 30s, right, and even the eldest Gen Zs aren't there yet, you're still operating in this like amorphous brain, whereas the rest of us are just
Yeah, I guess. What about the 25's prefrontal lobe? Have you heard about this
right.
meme?
Yeah,
Yeah, like it's the I'm waiting for this stage because I will be like a grown up, you know, I'll be mature.
I think women achieve frontal cortex completion before men do. So a big part of the meme is also like about young men and young women, so to speak. But do you feel like you're there? Have you reached
No,
No?
I feel like I'm not there. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for the big moment, you know, when I realize that I'm here already.
Okay, so I will say to that point, because this comes up a lot, like in conversation, as someone in his 30s, this comes up in a lot of conversations with people who are younger in their 30s or in their 20s. To that point of like, well, around your mid 20s when you're like your frontal cortex, whatever. I do agree, like there is a shift that happens probably in your later 20s where it's like something shifts where it's like, that's baby behavior. I'm not doing that. However, like the real shift is that early 30s one, or like the early to mid 30s. I think it probably hit me more mid 30s, but like there is a shift where it's like you grow up all of a sudden, where it's just like, and I think a lot of it is like, sure, it's your brain, but also I think a lot of it is career and circumstances of life, where
That's
like
right.
all of a sudden it's like doing truly doing XYZ like younger things, or are you looking at the world in a certain way? Like it shifts. It's almost like, you know, like when it's almost like that vertigo shot. I'm forgetting what it's called, where like the background is moving as like the person is also sort of moving in a way. It's like that. Like the world sort of like all of a sudden like
forced perspective.
yes,
Hmm.
the perspective changes just a little bit, and you're like, ah, yes. And like it happens in a way that sort of builds on what you're talking about. And like I didn't read the story you mentioned, Ben, but I saw everybody talking about it, and like it colloquially, like from what I glean from it, is sort of validating that like there is a big shift in your 30s that I think we probably don't hear enough about, because I think it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have
Right.
sort of like evolved in a way where like you're not going to go out and talk about it, because like that is sort of refuting, or it's sort of like it proves the point of like you age, and you're aging out of this sort of like, let me talk about it, if that makes sense, because it's a
Yeah.
difference of like operating. I think that's at least what I felt, at least.
Yeah. Well, listen, Kyle, I'm as you've heard over and over again, always going to be leaning on the idea that it's life stages that are the things that really
To that point,
change
yeah.
our development. What I wonder about, Sophia, is you live in a zone of conflict, right? Or you live under threat, and that's a kind of life stage change that I thankfully have never experienced. But also, you hear stories about the great wars of the 20th century and people needing to grow up fast and all of that sort of stuff. I'd imagine that you must be experiencing something like that, and yet you're talking very openly about being a part of a young generation and being a part of a consumer generation. I'm interested to hear you reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask the question, like to raise the question, if trauma actually affects your growing up situation, like your because like
It must.
I feel like
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm globalized, so I'm like with everyone.
Yeah.
Because I use the internet a lot, I use
Sure.
TikTok a lot, and of course I know the global Gen Z scene. But I also experienced something so unique and so like special to my region, like to Ukraine, where we experienced war, where I'm from Mariupol, so I'm from the city that was destroyed completely. And
Wow.
like I experienced a lot of like trauma that actually forced me to think like more about the future and more about my path, more about my role in my country. So now I do activism, and now I do like visual storytelling in my Instagram, telling about Ukraine. And I'm thinking if it makes me less Gen Z, like less Gen Z as Gen Z in the US or in EU, because I feel like sometimes we don't have the same narrative, because I
Right.
think more about like stuff that is happening in Ukraine that more like grown-ups think about, and people in EU and the US or Asia, they think about like how they're getting into adulthood, how they
Right.
will earn money, how they will spend this money, how will they, like, I don't know, travel and so on. And yeah, I wonder if our trauma actually influence the growing up fast rapidly, or and
Yeah.
you know what else I think about, if the overly therapeutic trend
Right.
influence the
Right.
growing up, because
So,
like we are, yeah,
I was just going to say, this is you mean in terms of the proliferation of therapy speak and the trend towards wellness and self-reflection, or whatever. That's what you mean.
yeah, because trauma and therapy is all, like they're like really close, because
Yeah.
it's
Of
Yeah.
course.
about like over awareness of your emotions and like the experience that you're going through. And I feel like it forcing people, Gen Z and like all generations, to become adults sooner than they have to. But I'm not sure if there is the thing that have to, and when you have to become someone adult.
Right.
So I'm not sure if it makes sense, but I think about it a lot.
Yeah.
Is
No, I was just going to say it does make sense, and it also makes sense that it would not be the jury would still be out, so to speak. That you wouldn't have reached a conclusion, because we are in, I think, for everybody, that sort of liminal state, right, between life stages and generations and so on, and all of which is made worse. And I want to actually, or maybe not made worse, but complicated by the specter of AI. And so, just to change subjects a little bit, Sophia, some of the stories that you sent through were very focused around AI, and on the one hand, a question of whether advocates providing, or promising us that AI would give us more free time, but in fact productivity might be declining, not growing, right? And that if AI does work faster, does the work still hold quality, or whether AI tools are actually de-skilling workers by giving work slop, right? These are topics that we've talked a fair amount about on the show, but I'm curious, where do you intersect with those forces?
Yeah, I mean, I use AI a lot as a Gen Z or
Okay.
as a
Okay.
person, as a creative person. I use AI a lot. I use my browser is with AI, my
Okay.
messenger is with AI, my email stuff is with AI, like everything is with
You are
AI.
fully in it.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yes, I'm fully in it. So I'm not like, I can't be a hater, but I can criticize, like
Yeah, of
I can,
course.
Absolutely. That's important, though. That's very important.
yes, yeah. So sometimes I feel like it's it's getting me more brain fog than I need.
Mm-hmm.
Because like
Wow.
when I create something, I'm not thinking about like the research and stuff. I'm just going to the AI, and I'm just like choosing the shortcut. And sometimes I feel like even my thoughts are becoming this slop, like AI slop, where uh, I'm
Wow.
thinking
Okay.
of a prompt, but I'm not thinking of like
Right.
creative idea.
Right.
And it scares me a lot, and I see it everywhere, and I discuss it with like lots of people, especially online, and I see a lot of people are like going through the same. And that's why I said no to ChatGPT, and I'm not using ChatGPT for a year now, because I
Well,
I was just like,
good for you.
Wait, okay, so
Yeah.
wait, talk about that. How do you distinguish? You just said that you use AI in your browser, in your messenger, in et cetera, et cetera. So you're using a different AI than ChatGPT, and you just said basically no ChatGPT?
I guess they are all somehow connected to
Hmm.
OpenAI, but I'm not using like directly
Specific.
ChatGPT
Right. Okay.
Got
specifically.
it.
Like I'm not
Right.
using the chat.
But using
I'm
it as like
using,
a search engine, like within the
yeah,
browser, like things like
integration.
that.
Yeah,
So
I see.
yeah.
technically,
Okay.
yes. Okay, got it. But like the ChatGPT tool itself, no. Which is like this is it's so that is all very fascinating and very, very interesting. And you know, big props, big congratulations to you for having that sort of like wherewithal to be like, I'm noticing something, I don't like it, let me unplug a little bit. Because I do think that like that feeling that you're having, I don't think it's unique. I think it obviously is very exacerbated from that sort of like heightened experience. But I do think like I've had bouts of things like that just from like spending too much time on TikTok or playing a video game for too long, where like it warps your mind a little bit, where you're looking at the world through that. And like it can be a bit fun. Like, you know, I'm looking at the world through like this lens of a video game I've been playing for a full week. But like that ultimately is like, oh, I've been doing too much of that, and it's sort of quite literally warping my world, and I can't get it off my mind. But I think like it's also exactly to what you were speaking about before about aging and about trauma. Like it's very interesting, or again, like big props to you for sort of even recognizing that, because like I do think exactly to what you said is that like, you know, the mind under great stress is particularly like malleable and vulnerable. So like that could be why maybe these effects, quote unquote, were a bit more pronounced, or maybe they're exactly normal. We don't know. But like
Mm.
it's a good reminder of what it looks like to the brain and to the mind and to your thinking. Because like, yeah, if you're thinking in prompts and you're thinking in like ways to extract information versus like doing the learning and the research and the sort of gathering yourself. Like if you're paying someone to go into the field and pick all your berries, and like you're gonna forget how to pick berries. So like
Mhm.
that is like it's yeah, that's like really cool that you sort of recognize that, and like I don't think you're alone in that. Go ahead.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Was it Sophia? Do you mean you get the sense from your, you know, communications with people by whatever means that you are at the leading edge of that sensation, that you are in the majority, that you are the sort of late, you're late to the feeling? Like, what are your peers saying about that feeling that you've just described, if anything?
Yeah, no, they don't say anything. They like we are okay with that, I guess, because we consume so much TikTok and so much like short
Mm,
form content that we just like we don't mind to be
Different
more
levels of
brainful.
brain rot.
Yeah, yeah. So
I prefer Italian.
I was really surprised by how many people are not using AI as much as I do.
Right,
Because
right.
when
Meaning,
you
when
when
you say people there, do you mean your peers, your cohort, or do you mean just people in
yeah,
general?
my colleagues, my
Okay.
friends, like I was talking to ChatGPT like all the time, like every day for
Wow.
several hours. Yeah, it was my friend. I had friends, but I talked to him as if he was my
Right.
best friend. So
He.
I
Him.
just
Yeah.
I had some insights from from the talks, and I shared it with my friends and with my colleagues, and they were super surprised by how much time I spent with the
Yeah,
ChatGPT.
yeah.
And we just started to share our screen time, and turned out that I was really crazy. And I was just like,
Well,
okay,
but
I need to slow down.
can I just I'll just interject something for so you know those who are not watching this podcast. Sophia doesn't seem crazy in any way to me at all. In fact, you seem very measured and very thoughtful, and you know, charming and personable and everything else. So it's like I
And
think
to
one
that,
of
like it doesn't, none of this comes across in any of your work. It was nothing that I clocked. And not that it's something to clock, but like it, any of those concerns and or quote unquote screen time usage, there's no spillover in a way that I was able to notice. Not that it matters, but like again.
Yeah, because I'm not
So
using it for a year, so I'm okay.
Right. Oh,
I'm
okay, got it.
I'm
So
healthy
if we'd had
now.
the
fair.
conversation a year ago, you would have been a different story. Okay, well, but
Totally.
I guess that's the reason I ask is because I'm interested to know, if through this conversation with your peers or through your own sort of meanderings and investigations, whether you feel like we have that there is an equilibrium that is reachable and is starting to become more obvious. Because what I have always said about AI is that to my mind, I call myself an AI bear because I believe that this thing recedes into the background as a utility. It's like electricity, right? I don't think there were.
Right.
I think when electricity started to proliferate, there were people who were just like, you can't don't run a machine that way. It's going to, like, we're going to become less muscular as a species, or don't ride in a motorized vehicle because we're not going to have horses anymore, or whatever it is, right? Like these concerns in the moment are logical and even make sense. But at some point it feels like a lot of the doomerism fades away and a lot of the hyperbole fades away, and we end up just with models that work. I don't know that we've necessarily reached one yet, but it feels like, Sophia, you're further along in finding that equilibrium than I am, say. So I'm curious to hear if you feel like you're getting close to that or not.
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
No,
Okay.
not really.
But do you think that because like one thing, the fact that you sent these stories that are sort of like doubtful or curious about the productivity claims, do you find that this whole exercise or this sort of like realization has made you a bit more skeptical about some of the technology?
Not really.
Okay.
I became more skeptical about like humanity and society because we have like so outdated beliefs and um, approaches to use technology.
Yeah.
And
To Ben's
we
point.
are like children. We go all in, like some people are just trying to substitute like all their life and all their activities and all their work with AI because it helps them to be more productive, but it doesn't do like any good stuff. Like it just produces more AI like work slope. And yeah, for me, like the thing that why I sent it to you, because like for me it speaks more of a humanity and how our views are like ancient and outdated and not like modern to the technology that we are using.
That's very interesting. And I would agree with that because I do think a lot of like, this is a conversation that comes up a lot in like philosophical circles, is that like, is human evolution stalling? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a big brain, this is a lot to think about, but like, the fact that there still is like torture and murder and things like that, like, shouldn't we have evolved out of that? Like, shouldn't we have like learned a lot of these sort of age-old human lessons and sort of moved on from them? And that I think sort of is what you're getting at in sort of a small way, is like, and I wouldn't disagree entirely from those things, even though part of it is also like, isn't that being human? But also,
Well,
shouldn't
yeah,
we?
but it's also the ways in which we think about the scale of time change over
Absolutely.
time, right? Like
Absolutely.
to steer this into a cuter, more cuddly direction. There was information that came out last week about how dogs have been domesticated dogs have been with us for better than 10,000 years. Like most of the dog breeds or most of the variants of dogs that are now present were already forming 10,000 years ago, like largely prehistorical human society. Cats, on the other hand, have only been domesticated for about 2,000 years. So it was a mere 2,000 years ago or something to that effect.
This is why I like dogs.
That the Egyptians really started to bring cats
I'm a
in,
cat
which is
person.
See,
That
well,
is
so
what. So you're in the
see,
cutting edge technology, truly.
yeah, exactly. The and then the troika of this story, of course, is the story about how raccoons are
Yes.
becoming, they're showing signs of domestication, in literally changing their physiology to do this. My point basically being, like, it's awesome that raccoons are soon going to live with us in our houses in 2,000 years. You know what I mean? It's like,
Totally. Right,
so
right.
to expect us to change on some sort of like evolutionary ways is a little naive.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
But
It also
it
gets back
is,
to what we were saying about marketing too. It's like, yeah, as if every generation is going to be different, as if like saying things to Gen Alpha is going to be that different or that meaningful or important as talking to Gen X. Like it's like it doesn't change that much,
well, but it does look,
quote unquote.
and Sophia, I think
Context
something
changes.
something you said a minute ago does gets to the core of where the concern is, because you said, I was talking to ChatGPT, I was talking to him hours a day. It is not a far leap to go, oh yeah, well, here's this young woman who has a relationship with this, non-human entity, and therefore doesn't need human companionship, and therefore doesn't reproduce, therefore doesn't continue the species, which seems like an incredible leap for someone to make about anyone whose life they're not, intimately familiar with, but also is like, logically, you can see how
Yeah.
somebody makes that jump. I mean, I don't know. In any of your conversations, did anybody ever say to you, okay, so have you decided to quit human companionship because ChatGPT, you're spending so much time with ChatGPT? You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, mm, no, nobody actually asked me to about that, but I thought about that because like we're lonely, we're super lonely generation, and we like do lots of our communication online, especially like when war is happening. You don't
yeah,
have
of course.
Hmm.
like lots of friends here because sometimes some people are in the front lines and some people are like abroad, and you
Hmm.
live alone. But I have cats, so it's okay.
Okay.
But yeah, so at some point I thought that maybe not for me, but maybe for the humanity and for like Ukrainian society especially, ChatGPT will be a savior, will be
Yeah.
someone like a
Yeah.
friend, like a therapist who will help them to go through the hard times and who will
Yeah.
help them to connect with people they have lost or with
Hmm.
people they like, I don't know, don't have because of like they didn't have time to find some friends, especially for Gen Alpha who just like
Hmm.
went through the COVID times and they went to the war directly. So like it just some for some generation and for some people, especially younger, it's really hard to communicate with people, to engage with in social relations.
Hmm.
So at some point, I thought that maybe ChatGPT will be somewhat like a friend
Right.
who will
Well,
be.
then it makes sense then how disappointing it is to confront the reality of, actually, this is
Right.
just more junk. Right. Work
Right.
slop and
In
tech
a
slop
way.
and all of that other.
Well, because I was going to say that like what you're speaking about, Sophia, is like it's very wise and it sort of speaks to the higher gods, if we will, about these creations. Like, you hear the stories
Mhm.
about how scrolling and even chatbots are really helpful for the elderly who are isolated. And like that really does help to keep them sharp. And like that is a really useful tool. For a young mind or a child, perhaps, or whomever else, it's a little bit more complicated and it has to be a bit more regulated. I do think someone or like the situation you speak of, like that makes a lot of sense. I think where it to the point of why it had a bit of diminishing returns, I think it speaks to the idea of quote unquote why it was created in a way now is because like it's made for these or not made for, it's made by these dudes or whoever who is like who are trying to sort of manipulate certain economies and or governments in certain ways, like not necessarily like Ukraine government, but like sort of basically like disenfranchising parts of culture and society so that like things can be automated, taken over, people can profiteer, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't that it really fails the technology, and it really sort of like, to what you're talking about, like it wasn't able to do the sort of companionship and the helpfulness and bring people together in the way that it could or should have, because it was designed to sort of like steal from Google, which is like, that's not very noble. Nor like it, again, people always say it's like, this technology was supposed to cure cancer and now it's going to be running ads. Like, what?
What was that quote? We were promised flying cars and instead we got, what did we get? You know that quote? It's a famous
I know
quote.
that quote. I don't know what we got, but I mean, we got people dancing on TikTok,
Well,
which I love,
listen,
by the way.
I think that's, maybe it was dancing on TikTok. To bring it though, maybe to a slightly more cheerful place, I think the one thing that is becoming clear out of all of this, and there was a story in the New York Times over the weekend about it, is that economic research is starting to show Gen Z realizing and insisting upon in-person work and interaction as a means to both further their own careers, gain experience, context, and so on and so forth. You know, for those of us who have benefited from positive and additive work environments for long periods of time, this is a little bit like a duh moment. But I guess as a glass half full guy, it gives me hope that the obviousness of that logic is making itself clear to other people as well. Sophia, are you in a like, are you dying to get back to an office? Are you in an office now? Are you trying? I mean, I guess that's the thing.
To be
Like,
honest, I hate office. Like I work from home and I'm more
Really?
productive. I like social connection, and sometimes I can go to the office because I have office near my house, but I like to go to the office to chat with people, but not to
Yeah,
work because I'm not
right.
productive when I'm in the office. It's
Agreed.
like it's really interesting how people can be less productive when they're like at the office where they're supposed to work, and more productive when they're at home with their like laptop and cats and I don't know, couch
I
where they
agree.
can,
I agree.
yeah.
Well, look, I think there's a different. The way I read that story in a lot of respects is that this is a group of people who are learning to be productive. In other words, it's a different kind of productivity, or it's a different kind of working that, measured apples to apples, may be more or less, productive, as you say. But really, that's not the comparison to look at. The comparison to look at is, how do you gain the greatest net benefit? And the greatest net benefit comes from a mix of a productivity that you become accustomed to and the socialization that you also can't get from anybody else. I don't know. The proof will be in the pudding, but that was my read of it.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to the office?
No, but I don't have a job in that way,
Ah,
right? I'm a
okay.
consultant.
Good for you.
Yeah, exactly. I consult and advise a bunch of different businesses, but actually one of them, who I am not required to go in and work in the office at all. I go in twice a week because I believe the building that company sits in is a really interesting and rich community of creative people.
Yeah.
And so I go in because I want to see what people are wearing. I want to see what people are doing. I run into people in the lobby all the time. It is deeply instructive, and it's instructive enough that it's worth me spending 40 minutes each way to get there and to endure the commute and so on and so forth.
Yeah, office is great for social adjustment.
Yeah.
It's like
I was gonna say, Ben, do you have like, do you rent a desk, or like have a like office, like a
co-working.
WeWork? Yeah, something like that. No,
No,
that's your
I no.
co-working that you go to, the place you
That's my
mentioned.
co-working. That's my
Yeah,
co-working. Shout out to Plus Plus. That's my
shout
co-working.
out.
I go to see those
But
guys.
I think that that's sort of like, to your point, Sophia, like that, like I like Ben, like I'm freelance. I work with teams that are sort of everywhere, and I am here. I've always sort of been having worked in TV, like I was always sort of freelance in and out of certain places. But like at a certain point, especially being new to a city, like I've now been in Barcelona for 3.5 years, and it's like you do miss having that social element. That sort of regular, like I go in here and I see these people, I wave, we get lunch some days, we don't, we do our work, we do whatever, we share. And that has been like making a really compelling case for like maybe I should get a co-working space. But then I'm always like, no. Then you get a different type of work slop, at least in Barcelona, so some places where it's just like I'm a founder and I'm like, don't give me that. I don't care. Don't tell me about your app. I don't care. Like I don't. But if you can find ideally a situation like that, like exactly like the work style and a place like that where you're not just being like pitched to every second is beautiful. Like that is the future. But in
Mhm.
practice, it's a lot of work slop. I love that. That's like that's a if you made that up, coin it right now. Otherwise, we'll continue to use it and we'll attribute someone at some point.
We're giving Sophia the credit. All right. Well,
Yes.
guys, we have reached the end of this particular conversation, but Sophia, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. And obviously we're first and foremost hoping that the conflict happening in Ukraine comes to an end as quickly as possible without the compromise of, Ukrainian sovereignty and that sort of thing. So, hopefully that will be the case. But in the meantime, please keep us posted. And where can the kids, as we say, find you to keep track of everything that's going on over there?
Instagram, TikTok. I will send you the links. You can
Fantastic. Okay, we'll put them in, we'll
Perfect.
put them in the show notes and in the
description
promo.
of it.
Exactly. All right. Well, Kyle, great to talk to you as always. We'll be back
Likewise.
again next week with another episode of Hip Replacement, the conversation between generations X, Y, and Z. And in the meantime, look out for Sophia on all platforms. Look out for Kyle at The Trend Report on Substack. Look out for me at Sick at Substack. And we'll catch you again next week.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye.